So my mom has had to get more comfortable with hearing me say she's been married 5 times, as if she doesn't already know that.
Right.
So as an example, me sharing how that winds up affecting my understanding of love and relationships and what I'm available for. The fact that my father exited the scene when I was 3. She's like, but you turned out okay. And I go, that's not how trauma works.
Right.
I see he leaves, they don't stay, I don't need them. Now tell me, how do I get married? If anytime there's conflict or something comes up, I push away, I'm actually going to go over there.
When you started to really dive into this space and you were like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is going to be my business. I'm going to assume that there was perhaps some level of, or was there a level of discomfort of like, oh my God, what are my family and friends going to think of me? Yeah. Like what happened there?
My family pushed back pretty hard, contracted pretty hard when I first started speaking openly and publicly. And this is for sure a bit of my personality. If I could go back and do a couple of things differently, I would have approached this with much more grace, but I just didn't
Right.
have it in me at the time.
For sure.
You know, when I lived on cruise ships, my family they were paying attention to me from a distance. It was basically anything that I shared on social media. People were living vicariously through me. It was mostly on Facebook at the time. That was really the only one that was really big
Right.
at that time. And it was the way that I showed up was that I was living a fairy tale. When I was in that relationship and then after the fact, I was just showing the happy moments. I wasn't showing what was really going on deep down. And it was almost like I held it against them in this weird way where I didn't allow myself to share with them what was really going on for me, what was the deep dark places that I was really going in that relationship. And then afterwards, they could tell occasionally something was going on, but I didn't tell them what. And then I held it against them, almost like you're not safe enough. I'm positioning you to not be safe enough for me to tell you these things, and then I wasn't taking personal responsibility for it. By the time that I actually started sharing, I felt like I couldn't keep anything in anymore. I had to share.
Yeah.
And so my sharing originally was me just telling parts of my story that nobody knew, that there I was gallivanting around the world. And little did y'all know, this kind of gnarly thing was going on for me. And often was about my relationship that I was in. And everybody just thought I was living a dream.
Totally.
And that we were perfect for each other. When in reality, there was so much darkness going on. So I started sharing that and it was challenging. I think for my mom specifically, she was a bit in pain that I was in pain and she didn't know.
Right.
For everybody else, the fact that I was being open about, being in a relationship where it was sexless towards the end, and then talking about the few and far between times where we did have sex, me talking about my inner dialogue and what I was going through and how I internalized that. And this, like, the idea that my value is determined by my body equals my value. And if my significant other is not engaging with it, then I have almost zero self-worth. And then I project that onto my partner, that something's wrong with him. But in reality, my internal world is something's wrong with me. And me sharing those things was very challenging for them to hear me, even talking about the fact that I was having sex. And so extrapolate that. I've told many, many, many stories now. And, with my sister, my brother-in-law, they made my nieces stop following me. They were like, Alexa's completely lost, I want to say like, I think this is a South African quote. She's lost the plot or an English quote, but which it's funny because I'm like, I probably only even have the access to that phrase because I'm talking about this time in my life.
Right.
But yeah, so my family just really contracted. I also think that they were very fearful that I was going to air everybody's dirty laundry.
Right.
So my mom has had to get more comfortable with hearing me say she's been married 5 times, as if she doesn't already know that.
Right.
So as an example, me sharing, that she has been married that many times and how that winds up affecting my understanding of love and relationships and what I'm available for. The fact that my father exited the scene when I was 3, for her, she's like, but you turned out okay. And I go, that's not how trauma works.
Right.
right? So that
Yeah.
isn't how trauma works. I see he leaves, they don't stay, I don't need them.
Mm-hmm.
So here's this big personality, this emotional big personality, and a little creature that's now growing up that's like, yeah, sure, I want you, but I don't need you.
Yeah.
Now tell me, how do I get married? If anytime there's conflict or something comes up, I just push. I
Yeah.
push away. I'm actually going to go over there. So, it was a really interesting thing at first for my mom to hear me start talking about the ways that other people in my family, their choices
Yes.
affected me. That was
Totally.
hard.
I bet.
Now it's very healing, and I'm everybody's favorite party trick. So I don't even talk about what I do anywhere I go, but we go to like a social gathering. And because, I guess there's something about breaking into your 30s. It's like, oh, she's actually an adult now. And it's like, oh, Lex, yeah, come over here. Did you hear? Do you know what my sister-in-law does? And I'm like, yeah. Do you remember when you weren't letting anybody else in the family come near me? So
Totally.
we've had a journey for sure.
Yeah.
And now it's I got actually a text message maybe last week from kind of a removed family member that said they were listening to the podcast I did on my show with my mom,
Mm.
because she's been on my show now, and I got to ask her, how did all this feel,
Yeah.
being the mom to a daughter that chose this life path? And he told me that he was laughing and crying while he was listening to it, and that he was so proud and that
Oh.
he's so happy that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But it took almost 6 years
Mm-hmm.
to get that
Mm-hmm.
reaction.
Totally.
So,
I mean, it's like it all has to happen in its own timeline,
yeah.
right? So I think it's beautiful that you're at a place now where your family and, friends and whatnot is like really accepting of it and it's so much more open to it. But I mean, I can totally relate too, just like not that I'm in, not that I'm a sex coach or anything like that, but just being in the world of health, wellness, business, entrepreneurship, doing my own thing, talking about money in a different way, talking about health and living and in a different way, for sure it ruffles feathers
Mhm.
and everyone has to again find their own way and do their own healing and to put a timeline on that, you just don't know. You don't know when it's going to happen. And you just trust that you're going to get on the other side of it and you're both going to make it through and still be able to love each other and connect, right?
Mm.
So, yeah. I think it's beautiful that you're in that space now. That's
Mm.
awesome. I saw that you
Yeah.
had your mom on the podcast and I didn't listen to that episode, but I'm going to have
Yeah.
to dive in now. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was episode 1, so it was back in 2020. I need to get her on for a round 2 and see, but it was kinda like pulling teeth to get her to answer things, so, and
Uh,
it was so funny because I would ask a question and she'd go, "Well, I don't know." I go, "No, no, no. If you had to know, what would you
what
say?"
would you say? Yeah.
And it was so funny because when we hit stop recording, she started rattling off all this stuff,
Right.
like myths that she heard when she was growing up and,
Yeah.
old wives' tales about pregnancy and sex and all this stuff. And I was like, Mom, you do understand that's not how the podcast thing works, right? You
Right.
say it when we're
While.
recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we have a great relationship, especially now. We always have,
Mhm.
but I think because I am more of who I really am, and I'm not
Totally.
afraid to show it to her or anyone, and I'm willing to have really difficult conversations. I'm willing to be vulnerable, even when most of my life I have felt like these people, even though they are my safest place because they are my family,
Right.
I have internalized that they aren't safe.
Yeah.
So, but I'm willing as an adult to hold myself in a way that I wish that they could, instead of being resentful for them not being able to do something they've never learned.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and it's challenging,
For sure.
is it the Ram Dass quote? Is it Ram Dass that has the, if you think you're so evolved, go spend a week with your family?
Oh, right. I
I don't
love
know
that.
if
I'm
that's
not
who
sure.
did the quote, but
Yeah.
that's a quote. And I for sure, absolutely.